Hi everyone. This video was inspired by a comment asking me if I knew what would happen to a narcissistic parent who lost a golden child. And for those of you not familiar with the term golden child, a narcissistic parent can often choose one child and make that child their all-out favorite. And in my family, the golden child was my older brother David. Yet, being a favorite was not a healthy or positive thing for my brother because he met a tragic end and he was greatly crippled by my mother's emotional need to control him and to never allow him to have his own autonomy. And I'm not sure if that is typical of all golden children. I suspect it might be. But being a golden child in a narcissistic family setting is very devastating. And I feel that I'm very fortunate that I was never considered one by my mom. And so this person asked me a very interesting question. And at first I wasn't sure that I could respond to it. And then I realized, wait a minute, I do have a story. And my mother actually is the reason for this story. Now, I love my mom. I always did, no matter how hurtful she was, because I knew from a very early age that my mother was a very confused and limited, emotionally limited lady. And I knew this at 5 years old. Yet I never confronted her. I never stood up to her because the way she would lash out would utterly destroy me. Now, she kept my brother David psychologically dependent on her for my entire brother's life. Intermittently, they lived together. I was off and on estranged to my mom. I would see her for a while. A few years would go by where she would become very upset at something, refuse to speak to me. I would contact her again. We would get along for a little bit, and then she'd refuse to speak to me again. And this was a pattern throughout my life. And for some reason, my mother was never able to understand emotions. Now, I'm not going to attempt to find a category for that or personality disorder, but I see this behavior in my family. And I'm going to write a book about my brother, the tragic life of my brother David, because his life was tragic. And I'm quite sure that there are other adult children and parents today who are in the same situation. And I don't know if writing about his story will be helpful, but I'm going to write it anyway because I won't know unless I do, right? So I've started writing that already, and I hope to be done with it before next summer. That's my goal. Anyway, my brother David was always the golden child. My mother refused to admit that he was abusive to me and my brother Tom. My brother David had a vast assortment of psychological issues, some of which was because of my own father's physical tormenting him. Yet I believe my father's frustration came a lot from his inability to be able to deal with my brother David's emotional outbursts. And my own father's father had physically assaulted him. So I guess my father resorted to the only solution that he had, and that was to become physically violent. An excuse, no, but that was my father's limitations. So my brother David grew up under the protection of my mom, but overly so, to the point where he lived with her numerous times throughout his life. My mother uh, became so darn overshadowing. She excused his poor behavior. She drove away girlfriends. She interjected herself into his private life instead of allowing him to flourish and learn from his own mistakes. And I did the opposite. I left home, created my own life, was independent, yet intermittently returned to try again with my mom. And I'm quite sure that the reason we were never close is because I never depended on her, and I was a threat. Now, I'm going to try to think of the year, but my brother ultimately moved to Hawaii, and I think I was in my 50s, so that was 20 years ago. And apparently my brother kept in contact with my mom and would call her faithfully every Sunday night at the same time. My mother never talked much about what they spoke about. She was always very guarded with him. And when my brother finally was no longer, due to his own choices, my mother still would not talk about what happened, what led up to it. And the saddest part was, my mom told me that he had written her a letter saying goodbye. But she wouldn't share the letter to me. She wouldn't tell me what he said. And I kind of wish she had, because why not, right? Why not share with her own daughter what her brother had been tormented with, to give myself closure? But that was her choice, and she apparently destroyed the letter. And I tried to reconcile again with my mom, off and on, for the past, actually the next 10 years, where she ultimately told me off again. And every single time, looking back, I can see the pattern, because every single time I appealed to her emotion and said, Ma, let's talk. Let's talk about things that we've never talked about before. What's bothering you? Why are you so upset? What is it about me that you find so troubling? She would tell me off, and she would say, I'm not going to talk about it. Have a nice life. Goodbye, and hang up the phone. Well, my daughter does the same thing. I don't know what that is, but I've accepted it. I've moved on. But now, going back to the purpose of this video, because what my mother did after my brother passed is exactly something that I completely understand, because she found another golden child. And this was extremely hurtful to me, because she had reached out to a childhood friend of mine. His name was Peter, who I grew up with. Peter used to come to our house. He lived just a few houses away. I think I met him when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And we grew up together. And Peter was at our house. I was at his. And I can't even remember all the fun things we did. Well, Peter and I lost touch. And lo and behold, I'm in my 50s now. And Peter's mom passed away. Apparently, my mother had either read it in the paper or learned about it somehow, and she reached out to Peter. Now, I'm going to offer you what I think happened here. I might be wrong. I'm curious what some of you think, but I suspect that I'm right, because I think my mother, who was lonely, all alone, completely distanced herself from me, from my brother, from my own daughter, her children, my brother's children, she reached out to Peter, and they apparently became very close. Now, she made Peter her executor for her will, and not only that, but she left explicit instructions for everything to be left to Peter in the event of her passing. Now, that wasn't as bad as what I'm going to tell you next, because what happened next was extremely hurtful. When my mother passed away, Peter did not try to find me. There were numerous ways he could have, yet he did not, for whatever reason. And he took it upon himself to go into my mother's condo, remove every single personal item, and either throw it away or bring it to a antique store. And that crushed me, because there were a few items that I had really wanted, one of which was our old wooden kitchen table that we had in our childhood home, which had belonged to my great-grandmother. And I had always wanted that table for deeply sentimental reasons. And Peter just took the table and gave it away. There was a box of black and white photos that he threw in the trash. And that hurt me more than anything. Now, I did a video on having a dream about my mother's condo for sale. And because of that dream, I learned days later that my mother had indeed put her condo for sale, and she was in a nursing home. Now, had it not been for that dream, I would not have seen my mother one last time before she passed away. And I would not have learned all this through Peter, because Peter had been placed in charge of everything. Now, I saw my mother one last time in the nursing home, and I held back all my pain and all my hurt, and I showed my very best side to my mom, because I did still love her. But I'll tell you something that really devastated me. She looked terrible. She looked absolutely completely worn out, laying in that bed. And she had a teddy bear, a little brown fuzzy teddy bear. And she looked at that teddy bear, and she looked at me, and she said, "You know why I have that?" I said, "Why, Ma?" She said, "The nursing staff gave it to me. They do that for people here who have no family." And I looked at her, and I was angry, and I was devastated at the same time, because my mother did have family. She just chose not to have anything to do with us. And she had chosen Peter over her family. And she had treated Peter like her own son, her new golden child. And Peter had been playing the role of her son by taking on the audacity to make all the personal decisions, to throw out all the family heirlooms in complete disregard to my feelings, my brother Tom's feelings, my daughter's feelings, and the grandkids. And I will never forgive him for that. And when I first called Peter, I had no idea how much money my mother had remaining. But I was more upset over the items that Peter had thrown away. And he actually never even apologized. What he said was, "My bad," and that was it. And I was so furious at Peter. But I didn't say anything. And this went on for a good month or two before he finally decided to gift me what was remaining in my mother's account, which I thanked him for. But I look back and I'm not sure if he would ever had done that had I not reached out. And yes, Peter did do the right thing. But I'd like to tell you that what mattered more than all the money, which was $32,000, which I used most of it as a down payment for this cabin, and I'm very appreciative of. What I really wanted was that box of old black and white photos and that wooden kitchen table. And what really hurt me even more was the way Peter reminisced about his own mom and all the things that she had left him and all the childhood photos that he had found in the house and special things that she had left for him. And I thought, how could anyone be so damn clueless? That here he is talking about all the things that he treasured and received from his mother's estate. Well, at the same time, he threw out everything that had belonged to my mom, that had been at least given me the chance to go through and see if I wanted them. And that would have meant the world to me. And yes, what my mother had done was she had replaced my brother David with a new golden child and placed Peter in that role of giving him the ultimate place above and beyond our family, giving him all the decision making, all the power, which I understand the power of attorney is all about. Yet, to me, a power of attorney should still respect the family members and their wishes. And Peter did not, because he assumed the role of having full control over everything. And so my mother chose Peter because Peter is a very and was a very submissive kind of person. And my mother was very controlling. And she also took Peter in as a very, very important person in her life, knowing darn well that Peter knew nothing about my mother's true nature, which was the way she was very, very crippling in our family, because all of that happened behind closed doors. And my mother presented her very best self, and Peter never saw her true nature. And yes, narcissistic parents do find new golden children if they lose the previous one. And it was a very sick and twisted relationship between Peter and my mother. And that really, really angered me and very much hurt me, because I thought my childhood friend Peter would understand the dynamics, and he was absolutely clueless. And what hurt me the most was the way we would talk on the phone, and he would tell me the things that his mother had left him after she passed, and how much those things meant to him. Completely clueless of all the things that he had thrown away that my brother Tom and I had would definitely treasure. And I cried and I cried and I cried over that. And when all was said and done, I called Peter and I said, "Thank you for gifting me the inheritance. I appreciate what you did. Thank you for talking to me, but I don't want to talk to you anymore. What you've said is too hurtful. I don't think you understand. Thank you for helping my mother, and thank you for being there for her. But you completely disregarded my family. And for that, I don't know if I'll ever get over it, Peter. And we are not friends anymore." And that's how I left it. And I don't have any interest in talking to Peter again. Now, how can someone be so clueless? I don't know. My brother David was, because he was so taken by being enmeshed with my mother. I think Peter did the same thing. I think when he lost his mom, he found a new mom in my mother. And he identified with her in a very twisted way because my mother was not his family at all. Yet they saw each other as the perfect dynamic. One lost her son, one lost his mother, and there you go. That's what the new relationship was based on. And so I've accepted what's happened. I've accepted the fact that those black and white pictures are gone. I wished that I had asked my mom for them when I was sitting in her condo sorting through that box. But with anything, we don't know when the last time will be for anything. I had no idea I would never be looking at those photos ever again. And I so regret not asking her for them. And what angers me the most about that is that my mother had saved those pictures in that box for over 50 years. And Peter just threw them in the trash. The whole box. I'm over it. It was a while ago. But yes, that's an example of how a narcissistic parent will seek a replacement if their original golden child is no longer. And I think it's a very twisted psychological need. And it's something that maybe my mother had incorporated into her life for so many years that it just became natural for her to latch onto Peter and make Peter the new golden child. Because she certainly would not have done it while my brother David was still alive. So I welcome all your questions and all your comments, and I love sharing my true life experiences. I'm not sad about them anymore. I'm not upset. It is what it is. I'm over it. But if I can find value in sharing them and offer the value to some of you, then it makes these videos very much worthwhile to me. And there you have it. I've been thinking about this for quite a while. I never considered sharing this one story. And I never told Peter that I resented him because I don't think he had the awareness to even know how twisted his relationship was with my mom and how close he thought he was with my mother. Well, he never really was at all because he never knew the dark side of my mother. And I think that's why my mother chose Peter, because she knew that he never knew how destructive and abusive she had been to my family. And I think if I had ever told Peter, he probably wouldn't have even believed me. Because all the times he came to my house, my mother was the happy-go-lucky, baking the cookies, smiling on her face. She never showed her nasty side to my friends. And so he would probably doubt me. So why bother? And that's what narcissists do. They put on their best side and they reveal who they truly are behind closed doors. So there you have it. I hope this story was meaningful to some of you. And I'm curious to know if some of you have narcissistic parents who have done something similar and what you think about it. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you're all having a really great day, and I look forward to reading your comments. Take care.